After a month had passed, the village chief called a meeting. Everyone gathered in the center of the village to hear what he had to say. "People of the village," the chief began, "we have lived in harmony with the ocean for many generations. But now, that harmony has been broken. The spirits of the sea are angry, and we must do something to appease them." The chief looked directly at Amma and Kofi, who were standing at the edge of the crowd, with Mira hidden under a blanket. "Amma, Kofi," he said, "your child is a bridge between our world and the world of the ocean spirits. She cannot stay here in the village, but neither can we simply cast her into the sea." Amma felt her heart beating fast. What was the chief going to say? "There is a small island not far from our shore," the chief continued. "It has fresh water and fruit trees. I propose that Amma, Kofi and their child go to live on this island. There, they can care for the child and act as guardians between our world and the spirit world." A murmur went through the crowd. Some people nodded, thinking this was a good solution. Others looked unhappy, not wanting to send anyone away from the village. Amma and Kofi looked at each other, unsure what to think. Living on an island, away from everyone they knew, would be very hard, but at least they would be together, and Mira would be safe. "Do you accept this proposal?" the chief asked them. Amma took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Before I answer," she said, "I need to tell you all something." And then, for the first time, Amma told the whole village about what had happened on the night of the full moon. She described the glowing water, the fish people, and the warning the fish woman had given her. When she finished her story, the village was silent. Many people looked shocked, while others nodded as if things finally made sense. The chief stroked his beard thoughtfully. "This explains much," he said. "Amma, you broke our most sacred law, and this is the consequence. But perhaps it is also an opportunity. Your child could help us understand the ocean spirits better." Amma nodded. "I understand now why our traditions are important," she said. "I'm sorry for not believing before, but I love my daughter and I want to protect her. If going to the island will keep her safe and help the village, then we'll do it." Kofi stepped forward and took Amma's hand. "I'll go too," he said. "We're a family, and we'll face this together." The chief nodded solemnly. "Then it is decided," he said. "You will leave for the island tomorrow at dawn." The next morning, the whole village gathered on the beach to say goodbye to Amma, Kofi and Mira. Some people brought gifts of food and tools to help them in their new life. Others just came to wish them well. Amma's parents hugged her tightly, tears in their eyes. "We'll miss you so much," her mother said, "but we're proud of you for being so brave." As the sun rose over the ocean, Amma and Kofi climbed into a small boat. Mira was nestled in a special tub filled with seawater, her tail occasionally splashing. The village fishermen would take them to the island and help them get settled. As the boat pushed off from the shore, Amma looked back at her village. She felt sad to be leaving, but also excited about the new adventure ahead. She didn't know what the future would bring, but she knew that as long as she had Kofi and Mira, she could face anything. The island turned out to be a beautiful place. It was small, but it had a freshwater spring, lots of fruit trees, and a protected lagoon where Mira could swim safely. Amma and Kofi built a simple house near the beach with a special pool for Mira to sleep in. Life on the island was not easy, but it was peaceful. Amma and Kofi learned to fish, gather fruit, and make everything they needed. Mira grew quickly, learning to speak and use her powerful tail to swim incredible distances. As Mira got older, Amma and Kofi realized that their daughter was special in more ways than just her appearance. Mira could talk to fish and other sea creatures. She could sense storms coming long before they arrived. And sometimes, on quiet nights, Amma would hear Mira singing songs in a language she didn't understand, the language of the ocean spirits. Every full moon, Amma would stand on the beach and watch the water, remembering that night so long ago. Sometimes she thought she saw flashes of movement beneath the waves or heard distant singing, but the fish people never appeared to her again. Back in the village, things slowly returned to normal. The fish came back, and the weather calmed down. Every month, a boat would come from the village bringing supplies and news. The villagers were always eager to hear stories about Mira and her amazing abilities. As the years passed, Mira grew into a beautiful young woman. Her human half looked just like Amma, with long dark hair and bright eyes. But her fishtail had grown long and strong, shimmering with all the colors of the sea. Mira loved her life on the island, but she was also curious about the village where her parents had come from. "Tell me more about the people there," she would ask. "Do you think they would accept me now?" Amma and Kofi weren't sure how to answer. They knew that some people in the village were still afraid of anything different or unusual, but they also knew that attitudes could change over time. One day when Mira was almost grown up, a big storm hit the island. The wind howled and the waves crashed against the shore. Amma, Kofi and Mira huddled in their house, worried about how long the storm would last. As the storm raged on, Mira suddenly sat up straight, her eyes wide. "There's a boat out there," she cried. "I can feel it! They're in trouble!" Amma and Kofi looked at each other in alarm. "Are you sure?" Kofi asked. "No one should be out in this weather." Mira nodded firmly. "I'm sure. We have to help them." Without waiting for her parents to respond, Mira slipped out of the house and into the raging sea. Amma and Kofi ran after her, but they could only watch from the shore as their daughter disappeared into the towering waves. Hours passed, and the storm slowly began to die down. Amma and Kofi waited anxiously on the beach, scanning the horizon for any sign of Mira or the boat she had sensed. Just as the sun was starting to set, they saw something in the distance. As it got closer, they realized it was Mira swimming towards them. But she wasn't alone. She was pulling a small fishing boat behind her, with two very wet and frightened-looking men inside. When Mira reached the shore, the men stumbled out of the boat, looking dazed. They stared at Mira in amazement, their eyes wide as they took in her shimmering tail. You saved us!" one of the men stammered. "We thought we were going to die out there!" Mira smiled at them. "I'm glad I could help," she said. "Are you from the village?" The men nodded. "Yes," the other one said. "We're fishermen. The storm came up so suddenly, we couldn't get back to shore in time." Amma and Kofi introduced themselves and invited the men to stay on the island until it was safe to return to the village. As they all sat around a warm fire that night, the fishermen couldn't stop asking Mira questions about her life as a mermaid. "I've heard stories about mermaids," one of them said, "but I never thought they were real. You're amazing." Mira blushed, not used to so much attention, but she enjoyed talking to the fishermen and hearing about life in the village. The next day, when the sea was calm again, it was time for the fishermen to go home. As they prepared to leave, one of them turned to Mira. "We owe you our lives," he said. "We're going to tell everyone in the village about how you saved us. Maybe it's time for you to visit the village yourself. I think people would welcome you now." Mira's eyes lit up at the idea. She looked at her parents hopefully. Amma and Kofi glanced at each other, then nodded slowly. "Maybe it is time," Amma said. "Things have changed. People might be ready to accept you now." And so, a week later, Mira made her first trip to the village. Amma and Kofi went with her, nervous but excited. They had arranged for her to stay in a large tub of seawater on the beach, where people could come and meet her. At first, the villagers were hesitant. They gathered at a distance, whispering and pointing. But then the fisherman Mira had saved stepped forward. They told everyone how Mira had braved the storm to rescue them, how kind and brave she was. Slowly, people began to approach. Children were the first, curious and unafraid. They asked Mira questions about life under the sea and marveled at her beautiful tale. As the day went on, more and more villagers came to meet Mira. They brought her gifts of pretty shells and asked her to tell them stories about the ocean. Even some of the elders came, nodding approvingly as they saw how gentle and wise Mira was. By the end of the day, it seemed like the whole village had fallen in love with Mira. The chief even made a speech, declaring that Mira and her family would always be welcome in the village. "We were wrong to send you away," he said to Amma and Kofi. "Your daughter is a blessing, not a curse. She has taught us that different doesn't mean bad, and that the spirits of the sea can be our friends, not our enemies. From that day on, things changed in the village. Mira began to visit regularly, teaching the fishermen about the best times to fish and warning them about coming storms. She helped children learn to swim and told them stories about the wonders of the ocean. The villagers, in turn, began to take better care of the sea. They were more careful about not catching too many fish, and they stopped throwing rubbish into the water. They even started a tradition of leaving small gifts on the beach at each full moon to thank the ocean spirits for their blessings. Amma and Kofi were so proud of their daughter. They saw how she had brought two worlds together, teaching humans and sea creatures to live in harmony. As for Mira, she was happy to have found her place in both worlds. She loved her life on the island with her parents, but she also loved her visits to the village. She felt like she truly belonged in both places. Years passed, and Mira grew into a wise and respected leader. She became known far and wide as the Mermaid of Peace, a bridge between the land and the sea. One day, when Mira was fully grown, she was swimming in the deep ocean when she saw a familiar glow in the water. The fish people appeared, led by the same green-haired woman who had spoken to Amma so many years ago. "Mira," the fishwoman said, her voice like the soft rush of waves, "you have done well. You have brought understanding and harmony between our worlds." Mira bowed her head respectfully. "I've tried my best," she said. "I love both the land and the sea, and I want everyone to live in peace." The fishwoman smiled. "Because of you, the balance has been restored. We have a gift for you if you wish to accept it." Mira looked up curiously. "What kind of gift?" "We can give you the power to change," the fishwoman said. "To have legs when you wish to walk on land, and a tail when you want to swim in the sea. You could truly live in both worlds." Mira's eyes widened in surprise. It was something she had dreamed of but never thought possible. But then she thought of her parents, of the life they had built on the island, of the people in the village who had come to accept her as she was. "Thank you," Mira said after a moment. "That's a wonderful gift. But I think I'm happy the way I am. I've learned that I don't need to change myself to fit in. I can bring people together just as I am." The fishwoman's smile grew wider. "You are wise beyond your years, Mira. Your choice makes us happy. Continue to be a bridge between our worlds and know that you will always have our blessing." With that, the fish people disappeared back into the depths of the ocean. Mira swam back to her island, her heart full of joy and purpose. From that day on, Mira continued her work of bringing peace and understanding between the land and the sea. She taught the villagers to respect the ocean and its creatures, and she taught the sea creatures not to fear humans. Amma and Kofi lived to a ripe old age, always proud of their special daughter. They never regretted the choice they had made to raise Mira, even though it had been difficult at times. As for the village, it became known as a place of wisdom and harmony. People came from far and wide to learn from Mira and to see how humans and the sea could live together in peace. And so, the story of Amma, the girl who gave birth to a mermaid, became a legend told throughout the land. It was a story of bravery, of love, and of the power of accepting those who are different. It taught people that sometimes the things we fear the most can turn out to be the greatest blessings of all. Even today, if you visit that coast, you might hear the distant sound of beautiful singing carried on the ocean breeze. And if you're very lucky, you might catch a glimpse of a shimmering tail disappearing beneath the waves. Mira, the mermaid who brought two worlds together.
Like, share, and subscribe.